assimilatory processes. So these processes usually are for some reason, are a little bit trickier for students to differentiate versus substitution processes. And basically, I want you to just think about what the term to assimilate means. So it means to be more like something else or somebody else. And so if we have one sound, this is where one sound changes to become more like another sound that's within the word. So that is going to be an assimilation. Most often, it's usually a neighboring sound. And you want to look for a sound that changes and a sound that causes the change. So there are kind of two components that are going on. It can affect place, manner, or voicing. Some people also call this consonant harmony when it occurs with manner and place assimilations. We're going to highlight labial, alveolar, velar, nasal, and voicing assimilation. So first of all, labial assimilation. This is when a non-labial consonant becomes labial because another labial is in the word. Here are some examples. So book becomes bub. Pen becomes peb. Moss becomes mob. So in all of those examples, all of these had labial consonants in them to begin with, and then the other consonant I think just got lonely and wanted to be more like that one, and so it modifies a little bit. Now these examples that I've given you are pretty close. You'll see bub is it's completely the same consonant that has changed, and so you have a direct match. But in the example like peb, there's actually a little bit of difference in voicing, and then in moss becoming mob, we have a very different sound coming in replacement or to assimilate. So just keep that in mind as we move forward, and the same thing is occurring for all of these assimilation. There always has to be kind of that target, that I always call it the buddy sound or the friend that has to be there within the word that the other sound is trying to be more like. Okay, so then we have alveolar assimilation. This is when you have a non-alveolar sound changes to an alveolar sound because of another alveolar in the word. So we have soap becomes, soup becomes suit. Door becomes doord. Lip becomes lid. So in all of those examples, there is an alveolar. So I guess if it helps you, look at your transcription in the target word and see if you can underline the alveolar that's already there, and then look and see how the alveolar, the other sound becomes an alveolar. Next we have velar assimilation. This is where a non-velar sound changes to a velar sound because of another velar in the word. So here's some examples. Cup becomes cug. Goat becomes gog. Sing becomes king. Okay, so in all of those words we ended up with double velars. The next one is nasal assimilation. This is where a non-nasal sound changes to a nasal because of another nasal in the word. We have mop becomes mom. Long becomes nong. Nose becomes known. Okay, now we've got doubling up of our nasals. Okay, now sometimes they can be in bigger words and also be further apart, but just be aware of that occurring. Okay, voicing assimilation. This is where we have voice changes, but they may not be directly related to another sound in the word, but actually to the word boundary. So the most common we have are called pre-vocalic voicing. So in these terms, I want you to think, they either have some combination of pre or post and voicing or voicing. Okay, and so we have kind of different combinations. So pre-vocalic voicing, post-vocalic devoicing. Those are the two most common, but we can also talk about post-vocalic voicing and post-vocalic devoicing and post-vocalic voicing. Now, if I haven't completely confused you, there's basically 4 different combinations there. Sometimes we see these other combinations, but the secondary ones that I mentioned, but it's just not as common. Okay, then we have, sorry about that, then we have voicing assimilation. So let me give you some examples of these with pre-vocalic voicing. So a voiceless sound before a vowel becomes voiced. We have 10 becomes den. Fight becomes vite. And then post-vocalic devoicing, a voiced sound after a vowel becomes devoiced. Pig becomes pick. Bees becomes bees. Okay, so I hope that you're hearing those differences. So the most common processes out of kind of these typical types are cluster reduction, stopping, and liquid simplification. But just for fun, we can't quite stop there. We need to talk about some idiosyncratic processes that are often associated with disorder. So these processes, first we have glottal replacement. And this is, we get worried, I mean, we kind of naturally put in glottal sometimes for like t or k at the ends of words, but this is being more pervasive with that. And so this is when a consonant is substituted with a glottal stop. So our example, movie becomes mu-e. Another concern that we have is when backing occurs. So that is actually when the child is making it harder on himself to actually produce a word. So this is when anterior sounds are produced with velars. So our example would be if house became hauk. So putting in K's and G's, that's a harder sound. Kids don't normally do that. So that's where the idiosyncratic part comes from. Initial consonant deletion is essentially the same rules as final consonant deletion, but I'm mentioning it here because most kids don't delete initial consonants. It's really kids with disorders, that's kind of a hallmark of that problem. Unless, of course, you speak French. This is a little side note, but in French, developmentally, it's very common to produce initial consonant deletion, and that's because of some structural differences in that language. I'm doing some work with that, so that's why I'm just throwing in a little tangent. Okay, then we have stops replacing a glide. Glides are usually pretty easy, and they don't usually they aren't typically problematic. So if yellow became, think about how most kids say yellow. Okay, most kids say they'll say yayo, lelo, but less commonly kids say dello. And then fricatives becoming a stop, and I think I made a mistake on the transcription. So this is when, oh no, this is what I wrote. So big becomes, it should say sig, when a fricative is replaces a stop. Or I guess in my example I had a double, so if big becomes sizz, now we have a double replacement there, a double fricative replacing a stop. Okay, I think I've got that. And then, so one last thing I just really want to point out. So I've been isolating each of these each of these phonological processes, or patterns if you prefer to use that term. And, but in reality, they are all layered together. And so in one target production, you might have multiple processes occurring at the same time. So let me just give you a few examples of these. Okay, so we had the word snap became nah. So, and actually, why don't you take a minute and pause with this last set? There are 4 words here. I want you just to hit pause for a minute and see if you can figure out what are all the processes that are occurring in these 4 words. Okay, and then rejoin. So then come back. So snap becomes nah. So what all is going on here? Well, we have cluster reduction, and we also have final consonant deletion that are occurring at the same time. The next example was park becomes ak. So in that example, we have initial consonant deletion, and we also have cluster reduction. So it was kind of the opposite of the previous example. But then we have the word shoe, and it becomes oo. In this example, we have quite a few things. We have a glottal replacement and also a reduplication going on. And it's a full, I would call it a full reduplication. Then we have the word closet becoming aw. And in this example, if you really wanted to be technical, I mean, there's a lot of deletions, but you could talk about how there's cluster reduction times 2, there's initial consonant deletion, there's weak syllable deletion, and final consonant deletion. So I hope that gives you a little something to think about as we move forward.